So I am Mark Foy. I'll do the day job part first. The day job is Associate Director of Performance and Planning at Manchester University Foundation Trust, but as part of AphA, I'm the Associate Director of Professional Standards and Chair of the Professional Development Committee who oversees the registration process. I've got with me Josie today, if you want to say hello.
Yeah, so I'm Josie Browning. I am one of the heads of business intelligence at NHS Gloucestershire ICB, and I sit on the professional development committee. I'm the deputy chair of that one with AphA. Yeah, been there for a few years.
Super, thank you. So welcome everyone to professional registration. This is the intro workshop. So over the next hour or so, hopefully give you everything you need to know about the process. Obviously got some slides to go through, but it's really your session as well. So feel free to ask questions as we go along, use the chat, shout out, put your hand up, however you want, whatever way is fine. And again, we'll share links or email addresses. Again, if the questions come to you afterwards, do get in touch that way as well. So I'll make a start, as I say, interrupt as we won't going through. Happy to spend a bit more time on some parts than others. Let's just start off with a quick bit of voting and show of hands. Let me just see what symbols I've got to play with. If you're already registered and want to know about reaccreditation, give me a love heart. We never get too many of them, that's fine. Give me a thumbs up like if you've had familiar with the paperwork, maybe had a little dabble with it, done a bit of digging and kind of started that process. Couple there. Oh, lovely. And give me the surprise face if you've never really looked at anything. This is the first time you've heard of professional registration. Okay, that's fine. Just to know where to pitch this, as I say, we'll take questions as we go through. We can spend a bit more time on others from there, but this will be the kind of complete walkthrough over the next hour. So in terms of kind of what we're working towards, just a bit of kind of where professional registration sits in the grand scheme of things. So AphA is the accrediting body, but it's under the FedIP umbrella. So you may have heard of BCS, Chime, CILIP, IRIM, and some of the other professional bodies associated with that informatics or DDAT family. But AphA is the route for analysts in that family. For ease and time, I'll just use the word analyst a lot in this, but when I say analyst, I do mean that wider family, whether it's data engineering, data science, and any other weird and wonderful job titles that people may have. It's just a bit much for the acronym if we try to fit it all in, so we'll keep it to analyst, but when I say analyst, I do mean that broader family. So ultimately, once you go through this process, your name will appear on the register in the public, so you can show off about that. So a little screenshot there of how that looks like. As you can see, there's BCS, Chime, and a couple AphA on that shot from there. FedIP are the ones who set the standards in a more generic high level, and then AphA and the PDC, as I've mentioned, kind of adapt them for that analyst family. And then just to add at this point as well, there's an annual registration fee payable to FedIP. Does depend on your band what that is. I think if it is band 7 and below, it's £36 and 8A and above £50. And that's just recently been reviewed over the last couple of months as we've moved to kind of this new push of professional registration, which is good to see. Okay, so in terms of the AphA kind of route from here. So yeah, FedIP, the overarching route, and this is the route for analysts, and we say we make those standards applicable. Just a quick note at this point, because it often comes up on the National Competency Framework. So hopefully you're all aware of that, seen it, or at least kind of familiar with some parts of it. They are two different things. The simplest way I think I explain it is the National Competency Framework is kind of what skills you need to have in your role, whereas professional registration, we're looking more about how you apply them or why you apply them. This will come up a lot over the next hour or so, but professional registration, we're not assessing the quality or the output of what you've done. It's the journey you've taken to get to that point is what we're assessing, which will make a bit more sense as we talk through. But yeah, the competency framework sets out kind of what skills you need. Registration kind of assesses how you use them, whatever skills you may have or choose to use in a particular example. Next slide's always a funny question that I do struggle to answer sometimes of why to do this, because I think a lot of the reasons are always very specific to yourself and kind of what motivates and drives you. It's a good way to demonstrate your skills, competencies, no matter what your career or your academic history. You know, people come into analytics roles from a mix of ways. Some maybe out of uni qualifications, others landed in it because they were the only ones who could use a spreadsheet at the time, and they became the analyst and the BI team from there. So whatever your route in, whatever your experience, this is how you can kind of have those skills validated. I say it's kind of an independent review of your competency and credibility. Next one there, again, it's your career, it's your development. This is something that's relatively new still. A lot of other professions, probably more admin ones, you know, your HRs, your finance have a lot more long-standing registration. This is something that is still growing within this. Hopefully you've seen over the last couple of months, it's now becoming a requirement. So there's a 5-year approach starting from the most senior bands for this to be a requirement for people. So this is a chance now. So it's great you've come today to kind of getting on the action while it's still quite new. Josie, I will just put you on the spot for this one for another view of kind of why did you do it?
Oh, well, I did mine back in 2019 because I wanted to be one of the first. So AphA launched professional registration at our annual conference back in 2018. I think it was launched as an idea. And so I took the decision to put myself forward and be one of the first 100. We were looking to get 100. And I think that second conference we had in 2019, we had 7 that had made it through. And then we became the core of the Professional Registration Committee, and some people have moved on now. We've got some left, and we became the first 7 people to be professionally registered analysts. And it certainly helped my career and my development over that time.
Yes, and although a bit delayed, we did achieve the over 100, I think, a few months ago, and
we did
rapidly.
It took us a little bit longer than we'd hoped, but we got there.
Yeah, and I think similar for me, I was a bit later than you, but did find it was kind of a real badge of honor and to know you've got that community behind you when you're making decisions, or I'll use the word being challenged, or, you know, people are questioning what you've done, knowing that, you know, you've had all that, your skills and your views assessed. It does give you that bit of confidence boost that I do see a lot to say, to know you've got that backing of a profession behind you. So next slide, just a couple FAQs that we get before we dive into the kind of what the process is. The first question we always get is, how long does it take? This is your classic, how long's a piece of string question. I'm going to talk a little bit later about reflective practices. Often that word reflecting will make some people recoil in horror at the thought of having to think about yourself and write about yourself. Some people love it, can do it, others doesn't come naturally to them from there. What I would say is do dedicate the time to yourself. It'll come up a couple times, but, you know, this is your registration, this is your career. Do try and give yourself that time to commit to this. I think dipping in and out of it is probably where you'll struggle the most. I think when I did mine from personal experience, I probably spent the first half a day staring at a blank piece of paper, not having a clue what to write. And then eventually, once I started writing, it really snowballed from there and started to come out. And we'll cover some tips in a bit about how to best do that. One of which is when we go through reflective practices, is do think of that kind of meaty, chunky piece of work you've done. That will make a bit more sense if we talk through a real example in a little bit, but that'll kind of give you a good start, and then you can kind of piece stuff around that. With that in mind, your reflective practices can be tailored to cover what you've missed. So again, you've done your big piece, and that's covered a lot, and you're missing a standard. Again, you can tell us a different story or cover a different reflective practice to hit those missing bits. That's fine. Like to explain reflective practices as telling a story. I think probably the hardest part is stopping, slowing down and thinking about those little micro decisions. When I bring up the standards in a bit, 100% guarantee these are decisions that you will do every day. Every time somebody asks you for a piece of work, you'll start going, right, where can I get that data from? Or who do I need to speak to do this? How can I show it? Actually, if I show it that way, that might be good, but then I'll show it this way. This will all be like an instant in your head. And the hard part is writing down those steps. As I said at the start, we're not assessing the output, it's the journey to get to that output. So all that kind of weighing and micro decisions is what we love to read of how you get to your endpoint. A common question that comes up, and especially recently, is there's a lot of uncertainty out there with jobs, is, if you're moving jobs or going through kind of those consultation process at the minute. As I said, this is your registration, not your employer's, which I've put at the bottom point there as well. So if you have just left a job and are now working somewhere else, it's still fine to go through this. The key thing is, can you evidence it? Again, we'll talk a bit about evidence later, but if you can still get access to the bits of evidence, even if you're no longer in that role, that's fine. There'll be people on career breaks or have gone through redundancy possibly coming up. Again, that's not a barrier to doing this. I'd say if you still identify as an analyst and that is still your profession, currently being unemployed is no barrier to going through this. Again, as long as you can evidence what you're talking about, still fine to go through this, don't feel. The other example we've had is if you've maybe changed jobs. Again, this will be something I'll repeat quite a lot today, is this is not related to your job title or your band. This is related to you, your skills and your experience. So maybe you've had to change jobs and you're not working at the same level you have done previously. Don't feel that I have to apply at a lower level. Again, if you can still evidence where you feel your skills are, apply at that level. And again, we'll talk a bit about the levels in a minute. There's also, with that in mind, no hard time limit on what you can or can't include within reason. The reason being that obviously a lot of this is around your CPD and keeping that up to date. So if a lot of your examples were 5, 6, 7 years old, there might be a question around, what have you done recently? But with that in mind, if you were looking at leading practitioner level and you were talking about strategies and policies, they don't come around every year. So that may very well be 5 years old because that was the last time you wrote a strategy. So again, that is fine, as recent as you can. But again, do bear in mind that we would want evidence of CPD. Something we'll talk about with the evidence is making sure that you're evidencing the standards. So when we walk through the reflective practice in a bit, you'll see that there's some points that are maybe not quite filler, but there's some sentences that help string the story together. You don't need to evidence those little bits in between. It's the standards we want evidence for, not your bullet points in your reflective practice. So that'll make sense in a bit. And just to repeat this final one, this is your registration, not your employer's or your current job. This is for you, your career, for yourself. So any questions before we go through the process on that? I'm going to take a quick drink. Super. Okay, we will dive into the process now. So in terms of what you need to do, so there is 6 overall levels of registration. Going to focus on the bottom 4 today. The affiliate and associate are a lot smaller kind of entry levels. It's more of a commitment to do it in the future. There's just a little bit of CPD to add, and that's kind of it for there. So practitioner and leading, I will say they're the proper levels, if I'm being honest, really, from there. And that's what we'll talk about today. Again, all the paperwork's on the AphA website, links to model examples and all the bits, links to the Fed IP hub to get all this information from. Just in case you think I'm a load of rubbish today, there's also on the AphA website links to all previous intro workshops as well. So if you want to hear it from somebody else, you can go and watch an older one as well. But we do put these on. Equally, if you want to share with colleagues who couldn't make it today, the links will be there to show them this. We do say only use the AphA registration documents. You may have done a really amazing piece of work that's, it's come out in something quite presentable. It could be a dissertation or some kind of brochure or example of what you do. That's all great evidence, but in terms of applying, it has to be on the registration documents for AphA. So once you're on the website, if you're not already got an account with FedIP, there's just a form there to fill in to get your access set up. It does ask you on that form what level you want to apply at. You are not bound to that level, so don't worry too much if you don't know what you want to do. You can tick any, it just gets you into the thing, so don't let that slow you down. And then just to note, I don't think anyone's on this, but when it does come to reaccrediting, it's the same process, but the reaccreditation process is a lot smaller. It's just a bit of CPD to maintain your level. If when you reaccredit, you want to change your level up or down, that would be a full application again, but it's the exact same process to go in. Just so you have a visual sight of it, once you're in, the FedIP hub should look a little bit something like this. If you see that, you're in the right place. And then very simple, intuitive website. There's a catalogue of learning. You can search for AphA, and there it's got all the links and documentation for whichever level you want to pick up from there. And then once you're in, dead simple, attach a document to a website and submit. So again, this example is here's how you upload your application, your effective practice, and your evidence. And then once you click into one of them, again, it's an attached file, save and submit for approval. Dead simple formula filled in a million times in your lives from there. There is a little comments box that's optional. It is just anything you might want to say that is relevant. There might be a bit more example of this later, but maybe if you have been a bit and ahhing about what level to apply at, or maybe you've struggled to do something where you might want to say, could I please have a chat about this? I wasn't too sure. It might be that you've struggled to do evidence, maybe for like confidentiality or patient identifiable reasons, you've not felt able to share what you wanted to. So you can make a note to say, I do have more evidence, I just can't share it at the minute, or maybe whatever you've done is a massive file and it's too big. So again, you can just flag something for there, but again, completely optional, just to give a heads up for anything that might be relevant. So once you're in terms of the standards, one of the documents you can download is a little snippet like this, which is a really good overview of the differences between the levels. I'll keep that on screen for a second just to let people read and hopefully just give you a flavour of how the kind of advances you go up. Just to repeat a point from earlier on, again, this is not mapped to job titles or pay bands. This is your skills and experience. So you might read some of this. What I would probably advise people to do is get up this file, tick them off, circle them, see where you feel you land the most. If you're hovering between the two, again, there's no right or wrong to go for from there. I think Charlene's just put a question in the chat, which I will answer now, which let's just say you were between the line of senior and advanced. So let's say you've played it safe, you've gone for senior, but actually you've wrote a really good application. Your assessor will read that and probably feedback to say, actually, we're going to reward you advanced because of, you've hit all the standards. They might even say, actually, you're just missing a little bit. If you can give me this little bit extra, that's how we'll move you up to advanced from there. And then the opposite of that, maybe you've gone, right, I'm going to reach for advanced. And again, might be a little bit of gaps in your evidence or some standards that the assessor feels you've not quite done justice to. They will feed that back to you to say, okay, if you can just give me this and that, that's how we'll get you over the line for the advanced. Or if maybe there's a lot to do, they will say, actually, given what you've told us, you might be more suited to senior, and we can transpose that to the different paperwork from there. I think the point I want to make is it's a very kind of two-way supportive process. It's not a send something off, never hear from anything until you get a pass or a fail. So again, and that might be something how you use the comments box for to say, oh, I've submitted an advanced, I'm maybe not too sure about this standard that I not feel well. Again, get that up. we will support you. We want you to apply. If I'm very honest, we want you to pass as well. We will support you to make sure you're giving all the evidence and hitting those standards. So when we talk about the standards, there's 9 main ones. We typically talk about these as a journey, as I've said a few times now, and I will keep saying over the remaining 35 minutes or so. This is the why and the how you do what you do. You will obviously cover the outputs, but it's the journey we are interested in. As I say, it's those little micro decisions. So kind of going around them, so actually even a simple ad hoc comes in, you'll think about what the best methods to do is, how am I going to solve this problem? Right, have I got time to do this? Where am I going to fit this in? I've also got this other important thing on, so I need to juggle something around. Do I need to speak to somebody about this? Am I going to take accountability for this job? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to work with? Again, decisions you'll all make before you do a piece of work. The challenge or the hard part is actually slowing down, writing those steps. Next slide, I'll just leave on screen for a second again for people to read. This is an example of the standards and the guidance we give you. This is all on the application form, so don't feel you've got to scribble this down or take screenshots. So remember, this table is right there when you do this. I'll just pause and leave that on to let people read. As I said, hopefully you can see from that a lot of the guidance is how or what happened. How did you get to where you wanted to do? Why did you decide that was the best? And then I'll just move over to the second half of the standards. Again, I'll leave that on in silence for a minute. Okay, great. As I say, this is on the documents. So hopefully those guidance points kind of give you a flavour for the type of things we want you to tell us, and that's how you kind of hit the standards from there. What we also have is these contextual standards, which kind of classes a bit of a golden thread that runs between all of these. This is a lot more of the what do you do and why do you do it in the context of healthcare. Obviously, AphA is the body for healthcare analytics. So this is you to tell us how your role fits in with the wider healthcare. And again, this will come out in some of the reflective practice. But again, is your role in healthcare? Are you aware of what you link in? We'll all be guilty of this, but in terms of terminology, do you take time and effort to make sure you're explaining things or being clear in what you're doing? And then the last couple there are around information governance and following GDPR. Any questions on the standards before we start to talk through the application form? Again, when we go through the reflective practice, we'll link back to the standards a little bit. Okay. Won't spend too long on the application form. It's probably the simplest part of the whole piece. Again, something you'll have filled in a million times before. Top section is just a little bit of a profile about you. Don't need your life history on this, just a paragraph or two. It's just to give the assessor a bit of a flavour of who you are and what role you do. Second box down is not the time to be shy or modest. Tell us loud and proud about anything you've done, talks you've given, presentations. Doesn't have to be big. That could just be, a local branch meeting or something like that. You've gone and presented. It may be awards and publications, but again, something that you've done, which is good. Again, do let us know. We love to hear that. Next bit, again, dead simple. Qualifications, just institutions, course titles, dates. Don't need modules or more detail. as I said, it's just to let us know a bit about you. And exactly the same case for the next bit, which is career history. Again, an organisation, a date, a job title, a sentence, or a bullet point, just to let us know a bit about your history. If anybody had looked at this paperwork over the last couple years, I think at one point it was probably not far off touching 70 pages of asking you for evidence at one point. That was probably what Josie went through in 2019.
That's what I filled in back in 2019. It was quite a tome once you'd completed that portfolio. We've streamlined it, haven't we, Mark?
Yeah, so over the years, it keeps getting smaller and smaller. So the application form now, there was a lot of duplication with the reflective practice. So the application form had every standard and it wanted you to give evidence about it. And people were often just copying and pasting from the reflective practice, or they were doing a bit in half and half. So now it's all of your evidence and your examples of the standards should be in your reflective practice and only a little bit on the application form. So all we have in terms of asking for kind of evidence and narrative on the application form is this additional information section. This is just now if you feel you've not done justice to a standard within your reflective practice. So in this example here, this person's given us 3 reflective practices, but they've felt they've not done SP8 demonstrating professionalism justice, so they've given us a bit more information to firm that up. Again, that could be used for any of the standards. I've got a slide later on with the evidence matrix, which is a really good way to check what you have done. But now in terms of the application form, that's the only kind of bit of narrative we ask you to put on it, is this box. And the following section, which is for those contextual standards, which I mentioned around your contextual role and information governance. They are merged on the application form. So again, a lot of this is a bit of an overlap. So, you can write a couple of paragraphs to tick off them, and the same for the information governance. We don't expect a box on IG and a box on GDPR. We accept they are very linked, if not the same thing. I'm sure someone can correct me and say they are different. But actually, in terms of what you provide as evidence, a single kind of box and paragraph is fine for that. So moving on to reflective practice. So going to use an example now, which is a real example. And I think this is the one that's on the website for you to look at. So in this one, this is an analyst supporting somebody in the elderly care director who wants to set up a frailty service. So they've been asked to get involved and provide analytical support. This person wasn't too familiar with what a frailty service was or what this work entailed, so they did a bit of research and they looked at some other data that was available. They knew at this point they were going to need an introduction of some new flag in the system to help them mark these patients, and they were going to analyze and present this data to support this service. So that's just the context of this, and I guess we'll talk through what it looks like now. Just before we do that, so for reflective practice, we use the STAR model. So what the situation is, what tasks or challenge you're going to overcome, your actions. So what did you do? What did it take to get this done? And lastly, what was the outcome? What were the results from there? So this takes shape in like a little box form, but we'll walk through each component to start with. So this is the situation on this model example. So again, they've just set the scene and the context as to why they're doing a piece of work. So they've been asked to lead it as part of their role. What you'll notice on that first one is they've started to flag the standards. As an assessor, we absolutely love it when you spoon feed us. Do tell us when you've evidenced something that this is the evidence in it. So we put the standards next to this page there. So they've, by asking to be involved and collaborating with others, they've said this is my example of collaborative working. This also covers one of the C2 contextual standards, again around understanding your role within healthcare. And you can see where they've put E1 invite email. They've attached a little bit of evidence, which was the email inviting them to be part of this group. Excuse me. Lovely, nice and simple. As an assessor, you're telling us you're hitting these standards, and this is where the evidence is, which backs up my point. The second bullet point there, again, doesn't have anything labeled next to it. That's fine. That's what I was saying before about, those bits that just help piece the story together. You wouldn't need to evidence that if it wasn't related to a standard. So as I said, we want evidence of the standards, not of your story. And do accept it is fine to put those kind of supporting points in. So this person's then gone on to say that they needed to attend some workshops and had some discussions and met with some colleagues to gain the knowledge they needed. So again, they've flagged that as CPD. So then them going off and gaining the knowledge they need to complete this task. And again, they've attached the invite to the webinar as the evidence of that. Next bullet point's a bit of filler. And then they've said, right, I'm going to attend these meetings and workshops. And now I'm starting to think about how I'm going to present this information. Do I show it this way? Do I show it that way? And again, they've covered off 2 bullet points with that one for, again, choosing the methods and applying a method to solve a problem. Perfectly fine to link to multiple standards at once. There will be some tasks you will undertake which do naturally cover 2, 3, possibly 4, depending what you're doing. I probably would draw the line at 4, just in the sense that it's probably getting a bit too generic, or it's hard for the assessor to work out what you're actually evidencing. We do see some where they just put SB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's like, what are you actually telling us? If something meets every standard, it kind of means nothing. So again, 2, 3, 4, probably fine. If you do feel actually this maybe does cover 5 or 6, maybe split it into a couple different paragraphs or something from there. Just make it really clear what you're getting at. So dead simple. Hopefully something everyone is familiar with. You've been asked to do something. You've done a bit of kind of research, and you've started to think about what you're going to do. Which takes us into the task section then. So again, they're talking about attending more meetings and discussing what the best practice is to do. Again, something you will always do. A request will come in. How best can I solve this? Some of that could be time constraints. It could be ability or knowledge constraints. That's fine. As I've said quite a few times, we're not assessing the quality of your output. It's perfectly fine to say, I did it this way because it was quick and easy and that was all I had time to do. If I had more time, I would have loved to have done this, or if I had the knowledge, I would have liked to have done this. But given the situation, this was the best approach I felt to take for this. And again, they've flagged the standard. So at this point, they've decided now that they're going to need this flag. So they'd think about the best way to do this. So again, they've kind of taken accountability, responsibility. They're autonomous now. They're coming up with the solution for this one. One that I imagine will feature in most people is I would need to write some SQL scripts to pull the data. So again, they've chosen how to do this, and they've given us a little bit of evidence of the SQL. As I said, we're not assessing the quality of your code. It just helps the story flow to say, and here's the SQL I wrote. At this point, you might be able to tag a few more bits in. So maybe this person was familiar with the data warehouse and where they wanted to get the data from. If maybe it was something you weren't too familiar with, if you were then going to have a conversation with your data warehouse and data engineering colleagues about the best place to get this from, there's a little bit of collaborative work and you can put in for that as well. Again, at this point, they've flagged that their knowledge is a little bit limited about something, so they arrange some meetings to fill in some gaps. So again, they've covered a little bit off here around, planning their organizational planning and collaborative working. It's not flagged there, but again, evidence of that might have been some calendar invites or Teams or email messages saying, can we meet and have a chat? I'd like to learn about this. And then they went on to say, we're going to need to develop some charts to show this information. So again, they're thinking about how they're going to communicate their information. And again, they've put some screenshots of the charts as evidence. So into the actions, just to make a differentiation at this point, the tasks is a bit more of a look ahead for what you're going to do or what challenges you're overcome. The actions may well link to the tasks, but they're now a bit more retrospective or a bit more further along that journey of what actually happened. As you're probably aware, sometimes stuff doesn't always go to plan, and you've had to do something a bit different from there. So at this point now, this person's telling us they attended some courses to understand a bit more. And again, they've given the evidence of the event booking, and they've ticked a few standards there that they felt that they covered. So again, by attending this course, they've spent a bit more time thinking about methods. Again, there was some autonomy for going on the course, and that they're now taking accountability and responsibility, one for their own learning and for completion of this piece of work. Again, they've wrote the SQL scripts. They've now said, oh, I did have to speak to the business intelligence team in the end because I wasn't sure where to get this from. So again, something as simple as that, as you can see, starts to hit a couple standards. They've made some pivot tables, of course. Again, a quick way just to analyze it. So again, they're now starting to think about how can we use this data? What are we looking at? And the next couple then are all about that presentation. So again, they're now saying, I'm going to show it this way. Actually, now I'm going to show it this way because I think this is the best way to do it. This now covers these standards. They've now presented this information. So again, they're ticking off communication. They've covered C3 for terminology. So they've made sure that their presentation is understandable for everyone. And they've now attached the copy of the presentation as the evidence. And now they're referencing a little bit about some training they've done about how they plan their time, and then the accountability they took for where there was data quality issues with this piece of work. On to the final section now, so the results. So obviously the team loved it. So yeah, they've done this piece of work and it's really been beneficial to the service. You've put a little bit of feedback there. We'll come on to feedback in a bit. It's always good to see when people you're working with are grateful for your work. Sometimes it is just a thank you. Sometimes you do get a nice explanation, whereas this person said, it's been really helpful for the service. So again, linking this back to the role and the evidence attached. Excuse me. And then last couple of points there for evidence. This is where they've referenced around kind of IG standards and how they made sure that the data the handling, processing, they were following local procedures from there. And obviously you do a good piece of work and now people want it every week, every month. So they've said, right, this is now something I need to do regularly and I am now part of this meeting. It's always the way, isn't it? You help someone and you get dragged into a meeting to talk about it every month. But they're now on the agenda to regularly keep on top of this. So when that's all finished, it will look a little something like this. So they're the exact points we've just spoken through, but it fits nicely onto a slide. Hopefully not to do any disservice to this person's work, but quite a simple task, as in an analyst was drafted in to support a project, chose the best way to do it, presented some data. Again, hopefully that's something that resonates with all of you on this call. There is no limit or rules for what type of examples you can do. A kind of an analytical ad hoc or support one fits nicely, but again, tell us a story about how you're hitting those standards is what we're doing. Do think about that story. It doesn't have to be massive bits of work. The second part of the reflective practice is a bit more reflecting, as the name suggests, but we, as assessors, we love this really. It's where a lot of the honesty comes out, where tell us what went well, tell us what went less well, what do you learn, what would you do differently? As I keep saying, we're not assessing the quality of your work. If it was an absolute disaster, that's fine. As long as you were still making the best decisions you can and it was something out of your control that, you just ran out of time, money, resources, whatever it was, or, your hands were just forced. You wanted to take it down this route, which would have been amazing, but somebody just wanted this and you just had to do it. Again, your reflection is, I would have liked to have done that. I wish I could have done this. I wish I had the time to do that. Again, it's the reflecting, it's the journey we want to talk about, not the outcome. Sometimes the best examples are where it's not gone perfectly to plan, and people have a lot to write in this section where they'll say, oh, yeah, this was a bit of a disaster, or, oh, I wish I could go back in time and I could have done this instead. Just before we finish on reflective practices, Josie, is there anything you want to add on them?
covered most of it, Mark. I was just going to reiterate this second page. Don't forget to fill this one in, because it really does help us as assessors to understand what you got out of doing the piece of work. And that really aids us in getting sort of the context about what it meant for you. I mean, you might have had to have some difficult conversations with people because maybe the results of the analysis were not what they were expecting to see, but we can only present the data as we find it. We can't manipulate it to meet people's goals. So that always comes across quite well and things like that. Yeah, don't worry if it wasn't the results that the people wanted. That doesn't mean you did a bad piece of analysis.
No, absolutely. Okay, just a quick run through on evidence now. Something that not people struggle with. I think people's minds always jump to the outputs. Here's my dashboard, here's my script, here's my shiny finished product. As from that example, a lot of the evidence is emails and conversations, or attend. Of course, it's probably not one that people fall into, but it's not to overlook those softer pieces of evidence. So just a couple examples to kind of give you some inspiration, maybe. So I'll say the obvious one people go to is here's a screenshot of my SQL, or here's a screenshot of my dashboard. Some people do send in Excel files, but just to reiterate, as the rather large text on the slide says, make sure we're not sending in any patient identifiable information. Sorry, screenshots are fine. So again, you don't need to upload any backing data or anything like that, whether it's Excel or Power BI, Tableau, whatever system you're using. Yeah, it's just, again, stuff like this is just to give the assessor a flavour, or just to prove that's what you've done. We're not going to go poking around and want to know the inner workings of your output from there. So yeah, screenshots, definitely no patient data. One we mentioned in that example there, but again, invites to training, webinars. Hopefully you've still got them in your inbox, but all great examples of CPD, or you going to find the information or knowledge. This is an example from the frailty one we've just spoke about. So this person also produced a little fact sheet to kind of support their presentation at the end. Again, really good example of how you're supporting others. So some of this explains what they've done, kind of how it works. You may have other little bits of documentation. Again, this is where you're probably saying why you've done it like you have, or this is where you are explaining something. So little bits of supporting information as to how you've done something is always good. Mentioned feedback. The top section there is just saying thank you. We're so impressed. Amazing piece of work. Brilliant engagement. Hopefully you've all got a little praise folder, or you've got somebody being kind to you once, but it's always good to show a bit of that as someone saying thanks, or maybe just someone not complaining. Maybe silence is praise in itself. But again, do send them in to say, I've engaged. And some of this might be feedback. It might be a great piece of work, but can I just have, and then they make a lot of changes to it. Again, that shows how you're engaging with your stakeholders and adjusting your outputs based on feedback. So great to see if you've got those little trails, whether it be email trails, Teams chats, whatever from there. Again, another one, dead simple, agendas and minutes from meetings. Again, a lot of this is the context you operate in. So if you are being asked to go and attend meetings to present it, again, you can anonymize it and keep the bits out that are just relevant. But again, good to set that context as to why you're doing what you're doing. And again, mention this one in the example, but again, if you're requesting further information, could be as simple as writing to your clinical coding team to say, I'm going to do a piece of work. What are the best ICD-10 codes to use for this? Like I said before, it could be writing to your data warehouse team, where do I get this? Also could be kind of a bit of peer review. So actually I'll say, oh, do me a favor, Josie, I've wrote this script, or I've designed this dashboard. Can you give it a check over? Have I missed anything? Is it okay? Josie writes back to me, oh, amazing piece of work, Mark. You're the best analyst I've ever seen. Well done. Hopefully you've got some chats like that to show that, you're taking those steps. Again, keep saying this is about the quality of the kind of checks you do in producing work, evidence in that you take the steps to quality assure your piece of work with somebody is amazing evidence, which people often overlook because they think, oh, I'm only asking my friend to check something, but it shows you care, kind of what you're doing, and you want to make sure that what you're producing is good. No limit to evidence, really. We probably a good application's probably got upwards, definitely minimum of 20, probably 30-ish bits of evidence, Josie.
Yeah. Yeah, if you got any less than 20 pieces of evidence, we might be writing to you and asking for a little bit more. But yeah, generally 30 or so should accompany a good application.
Yeah, mentioned at the start as well, sometimes things could be hard to evidence. So again, could be linked to changing roles. It's quite hard to kind of advise on that because we need the evidence, whether you can make arrangements to access stuff that you no longer have access to. But it will be a struggle if you can't evidence what you're talking about. As I say, there will be some stuff that you can't share for reasons. What we do offer then is actually your assessor can meet with you, have a Teams chat, and actually if it's just something that you can flash up on screen and the assessor can just quickly make a note that they've seen it, that's fine. Again, we want you to apply, we want you to pass, so we will work with you to evidence as best we can. Just looking at the chat now as well. Yeah, we'll send the slides out. Yeah, so in terms of testimony from project managers, if you've moved roles, possibly could be some. I think especially if it did come with maybe some screenshots of whatever you were talking about as well. Again, I think that would be a good way around that. Really, if you can get somebody to help you with the evidence, whether that be sending you some screenshots of evidence through or providing a bit of a testimony. I'm sure we could definitely work with that. Okay, right, final little bit on the second part of the application form, and then we've got a bit of time for any questions then. So as I mentioned, on the application form, there's also this matrix. Great for the assessor to see you've done everything, but also great for yourself as a checklist. So as you're going through the standards, you can tick off that you've covered them in a reflective practice. And then you can also make a note that this bit of evidence I've just attached relates to this standard from there. As you can see from the ticks, every reflective practice doesn't need to cover every standard, but every standard needs covering across the reflective practices. So as long as you've got something on every line, you're fine. You'll notice on this one that there's nothing ticked on line 8 for the demonstrating professionalism. If we cast our minds back to the slide earlier, that was the section where they'd used the application form because for whatever reason they felt they couldn't fit this into their reflective practice. But as you can see, they still uploaded 2 bits of evidence and put that supporting narrative on the application form to cover that. Again, we do accept that you can't shoehorn every standard. A story will take its natural course and you can do your best to cover it, but this is for, actually, if there's something that I just can't fit in, you don't worry if you can't tick it, but make sure you're still doing the evidence for the standard and referencing it on the application form. So once you've ticked everything and covered on that, you are done. Last little bit on the application form is we ask for a sponsor. This can be anyone who can just confirm the validity of your work. Doesn't need to be a line manager. Can be a peer. As we said, if you have change roles, it could be somebody in your previous organization because they're the ones where this work was done. Again, it's who you can get hold of, who can sign it from there. Just to tell a funny story about this, it definitely doesn't need to be a line manager. I have somebody quite worryingly ask me that question because I think they had some serious reflecting to do on their examples and they really didn't want their manager seeing what they were writing about. No, just anyone who can confirm what you've said on this is fine. And then the last box is optional, but just in case you do know somebody who is already professionally registered, there is for lack of a better word, a bit of a vouching system, as in somebody who's been through this process already can sign this to say, you know, they've gone through your application, having done it themselves, they've looked at your evidence, and you know, as far as they're concerned, everything is good and is proper from there. In that example, you don't need to submit your evidence file on the assumption that the person who assigned this has seen all your evidence and they've put their details on there and signed it from there. So completely optional. You may not know anybody who's gone through the process, but just if you do, can reach out to them. They can kind of verify your evidence for you and, as I say, vouch it. Okay, last slide now, just in terms of some of the key dates coming up. So the application windows open quarterly. So we're just about to go into the July window, excepting life gets in the way, and this may be the first time you've ever heard of this, and you're probably thinking, I'm not going to get this turned around in 6 weeks. So October is the next window. What we then run in the month of the application is the window is a Q&A workshop. I don't know if it's me and you again, Josie, doing that. I can't remember if we've signed up. I think I might be.
I don't think it's me. It might be you and Jane, maybe.
Oh yeah, I think it might be. So that is completely different to today. There's limited slides. It's very much bring your questions. You know, you've made a start. You've started to think about it. You maybe got a couple queries or tweaks you want to make. So bring them along to a workshop. Myself and Jane, one of the other assessors, will help you and support you from there. So again, just something to help you get over the line. Registration window closes on the 31st of July. What I would say is not to encourage tardiness, but if it gets to the 30th, 31st, and you're about 80–90% of the way there and the clock's just ticking against you, do reach out. I wouldn't want you to sit and wait till October if you're nearly there. We will accept, within reason, some late applications, but reach out, let us know if you think you want to get it in. What we then do is at our August Professional Development Committee that's where we'll assign out the applications to our assessors, and then we give the assessors a month to review them. That will include reaching out to you if there's any questions. So don't worry if you don't hear anything, but that window is for, like we said at the start, you know, if we want to move you up or down a level, or if we want to speak to you to get a bit more evidence, we'll have that conversation in that period. And then in the September PDC, that's where we will ratify them as a group, and then you will be informed of what I'm sure will be your success. So we've got 5 minutes left. I know I've had some questions going through, but time now if there is any questions anyone wants to ask that we've not covered, or any bits that want to go over again. Fantastic, but you explained it very well. You're all very shy. So I think we've got obviously we've had questions going through the chat. Use that as we're going through. Anything that might pop in your head afterwards, there's the email address, info@AphA Analysts, which I'm sure will appear in the chat if it's not already. Or paperwork on the website. We've got the Q&A session in 3 weeks' time. Hopefully everything you need to get going, and we see some applications flying through in July. If there's nothing else, I'll hand over to Josie for any closing comments.
So say there's also a link in the chat for a feedback form. If you could just take a few minutes to fill in the feedback form, it helps Mark and myself and the team to improve our training sessions. Yeah, just let us know how we did. If we did rubbish, tell us, we want to know. Or if we did really good, just the good one, then it helps us to you know, reflect on the feedback and make improvements for the next round of people.
Super. Well, hopefully that answers all your questions and made it a bit clearer for everyone. So yes, good luck, and I'll see you later.